27-year-old three-time felon Kayla Allery was paroled in December 2023 after serving prison time for arson. Just a handful of months later, in March of 2024, she was accused of fatally shooting 41-year-old Raul Cardoza Lopez while he was sitting in his work vehicle outside a Las Vegas apartment complex. Cardoza Lopez and his brother were at the property to clean two carpets and were taking a break when the victim was shot in the neck. According to witnesses, the crime was completely unprovoked. The victim died from his injuries despite life-saving measures immediately being carried out after the shooting. By the time officers arrived, Ellery was no longer at the scene. Witnesses described her as having tattoos on her face and body and a sleeping bag draped over her shoulders. They had also seen her trying to open car doors, and a few employees had started following her and telling her to leave. She tried climbing over a wall to exit the property, but the employees redirected her to the main entrance. Allery then shot Cardoza Lopez as she walked past his work van. Police found a woman matching Allery's description near the crime scene. She had a .45 caliber handgun and methamphetamine in her possession, indicating the possibility that she was high when she pulled the trigger. When asked about how she acquired the weapon, she said she didn't remember, but that she likely stole it since she didn't have any money. She also claimed to have no memory of the shooting. Allery is facing charges of open murder, assault with a deadly weapon, owning or possessing a gun by a prohibited person, carrying a concealed weapon without a permit, discharging a gun into an occupied structure or vehicle, and violating parole. She's also facing a battery charge for attacking a fellow inmate out of nowhere while in custody following her arrest. The accused killer remains held without bond at the Clark County Detention Center pending the outcome of her case. According to the most recent available updates, the judge has ordered her to undergo a mental evaluation to determine if she's competent to stand trial. Number 13. Corin Kramer. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in January 2023, 25-year-old former college athlete Corin Kramer attacked a 78-year-old man at the Cleveland Avenue Max train station in Portland, Oregon. He bit the senior citizen's ear off and gnawed at his face, leaving part of the victim's skull exposed. Kramer spat the elderly man's skin out onto the train tracks and was taken into custody at the scene. When police asked for his name, he identified himself as L. Baker. He was eventually identified through fingerprints. At the time of the attack, Kramer was suffering from unmedicated schizophrenia and believed that the victim was a killer robot. He was also under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, and fentanyl. Kramer was found incompetent to stand trial due to his mental illness after spending 4 months undergoing treatment at a state hospital. The judge ruled that he was able to proceed with his court hearings. He pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree attempted assault charge and was sentenced to 40 months in prison, followed by 20 months of supervised release. He's also the second person to ever receive a permanent lifetime ban from the Tri-Met transportation system. During his sentencing hearing, Kramer said he felt horribly about his actions and that he now understands that he must take medication to manage his condition and prevent himself from becoming violent in the future. Once he finishes his prison time, he'll be allowed to apply to serve his probation in his home state of New Jersey, where his family lives. Number 12. Shane Burns. After dropping her husband off at a bus station in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, one morning in May of 2023, 60-year-old Cheryl Ryan Parsley stopped at a tire store in Roseville to fill her car tires with air. She was crouched next to one of her rear tires when a knife-wielding man ambushed her. The assailant repeatedly stabbed Ryan Parsley in the torso with a 4-inch hunting knife as she tried to fight him off, then slit her throat. As she lay dying from her injuries, her killer drove to a nearby bus station where he stabbed 43-year-old Robert Bakey, who was on his way to work, in the hip. A struggle ensued and the attacker proceeded to stab Bakey 7 more times in the back and arms. The fight continued for a few minutes before the stabber fled the scene in his car. Bakey managed to walk down the street to his house where he dialed 911. He received stitches and was hospitalized overnight. 6 hours after Bakey was stabbed, police located the suspect's vehicle and took him into custody. Identified as 31-year-old Shane Burns, he resisted arrest and tried grabbing an officer's gun. While being processed at the police station, he hit an officer in the chest and stole his pocket knife. Thankfully, the police managed to subdue him without incurring any serious injuries. Burns refused to speak with investigators, leaving his motive for the attacks unclear. Inside the suspect's vehicle, officers found Ryan Parsley's blood on several items, including a latex glove and a jacket matching the outfit Burns was wearing when the woman was killed. The car also contained 2 guns, some ammunition, and several knives. Burns faces 8 criminal charges, including first-degree murder and attempted murder. He was found competent to stand trial after undergoing a mental evaluation and is slated to go to trial in November. Number 11. Manzy Smith Jr. 69-year-old Evelyn Player was a devoted worshiper and staff member at the Southern Baptist Church in East Baltimore, Maryland, where she was murdered on a Tuesday morning in November of 2021. Player had entered the church at around 6 o'clock in the morning to let contractors inside to do some work. About an hour later, 2 employees found her in the bathroom with severe stab wounds. Emergency responders pronounced her dead at the scene and the search for her killer began. The killer had inflicted 38 stab wounds to Player's face, neck, and chest, and 54 cut-in wounds, including defensive injuries to her hands. It was clear that she had fought for her life right up until her last moments. DNA evidence at the scene turned up as a match to 62-year-old Manzy Smith Jr., who had been hired to perform labor at the church. He was also connected to the crime through surveillance footage and had pawned 2 of Player's gold rings after the murder. During questioning, police noticed injuries to his hand, arm, and chest. Smith had a lengthy criminal record, including an assault case from the early 90s that he served time for, and an 8-year prison sentence for robbery. Smith had completed his parole for the robbery case the month prior to Player's murder. According to authorities, there was no evidence that the killer and his victim knew each other. In January 2023, Smith pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and other charges relating to the crime. He was sentenced to life with all but 50 years suspended, followed by 5 years of probation, which means that he'll likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Smith apologized for his actions at his sentencing hearing, but he never explained why he killed the senior citizen. Number 10. Christopher Kba Hall. 60-year-old Brian Savini was buying coffee at a gas station in North Providence, Rhode Island, in May of 2021, when a stranger approached him from behind and stabbed him in the back. Surveillance footage showed Savini standing at the counter while 27-year-old Christopher Kba Hall exited the restroom and stood behind him. Kba Hall placed his jacket hood over his head, took out a large knife, and plunged it into Savini twice before fleeing the scene on foot. Police located him in a parking lot next door, where a violent struggle took place between him and the responding officers. They managed to take Kba Hall into custody after tasing him, and he was subsequently charged with first-degree murder, simple assault, resisting arrest, and possession of a knife with a blade more than 3 inches long. At the time of Savini's death, Kba Hall was on probation for a weapon charge. He also had several prior convictions, including felony assault with a dangerous weapon, assaulting someone over the age of 60. Shortly after his arrest for Savini's murder, his twin brother, Christian Kba Hall, told NBC 10 News that Christopher had been suffering from schizophrenia for years and had recently stopped taking his medication. Records show that Kba Hall underwent a competency evaluation and is currently detained at a mental health facility. His case is ongoing. Number 9. Mohammed Noor. 34-year-old Johanita Kasiwa Dogby was murdered in broad daylight in London's Brixton neighborhood in May of 2023. She had gone to the area to do some shopping and was walking in a park when a man approached her from behind and slashed her neck 3 times, killing her at the scene. The following day, police arrested 34-year-old Mohammed Noor for killing Dogby. 2 days prior to the murder, he had slashed a man and 2 women in the face. Investigators concluded that the attacks on the 3 surviving victims in Dogby's murder were unprovoked and random. At the time of his crime spree, Noor was homeless and staying in temporary housing for vulnerable adults. He was addicted to drugs and had previous drug and weapon-related convictions on his record. Noor admitted to murdering the victim and being in possession of a blade and a makeshift blade fashioned from a piece of glass. He denied the other 3 attacks and refused to attend his trial. He also refused to attend his sentencing after being found guilty as charged. But the judge spoke as if he was there while announcing his punishment and ordered for her words to be read aloud to him in prison, describing Dogby's murder as random, vicious, horrific, and without mercy. The judge said that she believed Noor would have committed more violent acts if he had not been captured. She sentenced the convicted killer to life with a minimum of 32 years, which means he'll be in his late 60s when he becomes eligible for release. Number 8. Carl Hagland. In September 2024, a 48-year-old Massachusetts man named Carl E. Hagland was accused of striking several vehicles during an out-of-control joyride in his pickup truck, which ended with him driving onto the University of Colorado football field in Boulder. He also hit several trees and street signs during his reckless crime spree. While witnesses and police officers tried to stop him, Hagland continued to flee, nearly striking at least one person as law enforcement chased after him. The fleeing suspect managed to throw the cops off his trail for several minutes before reappearing near the stadium and ramming his truck through the gate. Hagland's heavily damaged truck came to a stop near the 40-yard line with a trail of tire tracks behind it. He was arrested on suspicion of criminal attempt vehicular assault, reckless endangerment, vehicular eluding, failure to obey a traffic control device, trespassing, obstruction of a peace officer, driving without insurance, criminal mischief between $100,000 and $150,000, and 3 counts of leaving the scene after damage. Records show that he's currently being held at the Boulder County Jail with bail set at $25,000. Number 7. Isaac Ross. A quiet afternoon at a Panera restaurant in Glendale, Colorado, quickly devolved into chaos in September of 2024 when an irate customer flew into a tirade. Isaac Ross, also known as Kendall Ross, could be seen screaming and throwing items off the counter at employees in cell phone footage captured by a customer. Natalie Wiersma, who filmed the video, later told local news station KDVR that the suspect kept yelling at staff members to return a phone. The seemingly confused workers kept telling Ross that they didn't have his phone. They also begged him to leave the restaurant, but his behavior only escalated as he hurled a racial slur at a customer and continued with his outburst. One diner got so irated by the suspect's behavior that he grabbed him from behind in an attempt to stop him from throwing things at the staff. Ross knocked the man onto the floor and slapped him while another customer rushed over and wrestled him to the ground. In the meantime, a worker came out from behind the counter and struck him in the head with a pan 5 times. She was later applauded by both customers and social media users alike for her quick-thinking actions. The struggle between Ross and a customer continued while someone yelled to call the police. They were still fighting when the video ended, but the suspect fled shortly thereafter. He returned a little while later and assaulted a vulnerable male victim who received treatment for minor injuries. Ross fled again, and police have appealed to the public for information on his whereabouts. Number 6. Corey Antoine Thompson. While responding to a reported shooting one evening in December 2023, police found 46-year-old U.S. Army veteran Roderick Butler lying on a sidewalk in uptown Dallas, Texas, with a gunshot wound. He was rushed to a nearby hospital where he died from his injuries. Butler had recently moved into an apartment in the area after struggling with homelessness and mental health issues. His mother told NBC5 that her son wouldn't harm anyone and that she couldn't imagine why anyone would want to kill him. Witnesses reported seeing Butler's killer running through the parking lot of a Wells Fargo bank that Butler had been stabbed outside of. 6 days after the murder, police arrested 45-year-old Corey Antoine Thompson on suspicion of murder. Thompson had an extensive criminal history and was out on bond for criminal mischief, assault, and terroristic threat charges stemming from an incident that occurred 5 months earlier. A few days after he was arrested for killing Butler, police in Bulk Springs announced that he was also the prime suspect in the Christmas Day murder of 28-year-old Francisco Jesus Manriquez, who was shot in the head multiple times while sitting in his car at around 4 o'clock in the morning. Manriquez's girlfriend was in the car when the shooting occurred. She told police that she and Manriquez were sitting in his car when a man rolled up next to them in a Lincoln SUV and began firing without warning. The woman immediately ran to a nearby relative for help, but by the time they returned to the car, Manriquez was dead. Thompson was also connected to a shooting which had occurred 5 days before Butler's murder. The victim in that case survived. When news of his suspected role in these crimes was announced, he had only been charged with killing Butler. Records show that he's currently in custody, but it's unclear whether he's been charged with Manriquez's murder or the non-fatal shooting he was named as a suspect in. Number 5. Brian Fulton. On what began as an ordinary work shift at the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis in September 2024, 58-year-old Alan Gosnell was brutally attacked by a stranger. A witness heard Gosnell begging for his life and saying, "Why are you doing this?" as the suspect beat him. When the onlooker returned after running for help, he saw the attacker strangling Gosnell with a wire. Identified by police as 33-year-old Brian Fulton, the suspect reportedly said to the witness, "Yeah, I killed him, and he deserved it." Fulton claimed that Gosnell had a knife in his hand and threatened witnesses as they followed the accused killer and snapped photos and video with his phone. By the time officers arrived, Gosnell was lying in a pool of his own blood. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. During questioning, Fulton told police that he had just neutralized an international terrorist nuclear threat. He's currently awaiting his next court date from behind bars at the Marion County Jail, where he's being detained on a murder charge. Number 4. Michael John Adeni. 30-year-old Vanessa LaDuca was walking to her job as a personal trainer in downtown Calgary, Alberta, in March of 2022, when a man attacked her out of nowhere. She was just 50 steps away from the building she worked in when the suspect, later identified by police as 26-year-old Michael John Adeni, stabbed her to death in cold blood. A nearby security guard rushed over to LaDuca and stayed with her until emergency responders arrived, comforting her during her final moments. Investigators found no connection between the victim and the accused killer, who is charged with first-degree murder. Adeni's motive for committing the alleged crime is unclear, but his mental health was called into question within weeks of his arrest when his defense attorney raised concerns in court that he might be suffering from untreated schizophrenia. This suspicion appears to stem at least partially from the discovery of YouTube videos Adeni had made discussing his belief in conspiracies surrounding anime plot lines. The judge overseeing the case ordered Adeni to undergo an evaluation to determine whether he was suffering a psychotic break at the time of LaDuca's murder. If that happened to be the case, it would mean that Adeni was not considered responsible for his actions due to his mental health, and he would be sent to a secure psychiatric facility instead of prison. He was found competent to stand trial, but the proceedings have repeatedly been delayed. The most recent trial date was set for September 2024, but news outlets have not reported on it actually happening, indicating that the case may have been postponed yet again. Speaking with the Calgary Herald, the victim's mother, Erica LaDuca, expressed her frustrations with the seemingly endless postponement of Adeni's trial, stating, "Everything's for him." She said that the family's lingering anguish and grief has alienated them from friends, while the details revealed during Adeni's court hearings have caused her to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. While the court proceedings have been continuously adjourned, city planners have wasted no time acting on their plans to implement new measures to make downtown Calgary safer. LaDuca had always felt uneasy on her way to work, and her tragic death sparked multiple ongoing initiatives, including to address the root causes of crime, establish a new police station, and keep the downtown area better maintained. Number 3. The murder of FAO Hernandez. eager to earn some extra money and spend time with his daughter. 58-year-old Fausto Hernandez traveled from Texas to Murfreesboro, Tennessee for a temporary construction job in 2016. He quickly established a routine of stopping behind a local tobacco shop and sitting down to call his wife and catch up during his nighttime walk home. Hernandez had just hung up from one of these calls on a July evening when he almost immediately called her back, which was out of character. He didn't say anything to his wife when she answered the phone, but she could hear an altercation going on in the background. Shortly thereafter, several witnesses called 911 and reported finding Hernandez on the ground with a gunshot wound. Hernandez was still alive when emergency responders arrived at the scene. He told them a black man had shot him but was unable to provide any more details before being rushed to the hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries after undergoing emergency surgery. His murder was not captured on surveillance video, even though it happened in a public area, and the killer remains at large to this day. Despite their best efforts to solve the case, detectives seem to be no closer to catching the culprit than they were at the beginning of their investigation. Today's topic was requested by Melissa George 2915 and Mikey FN A6684. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Dante Ramon Smith. 3 Detroit residents were killed and another was injured over a 2.5-hour span during a Sunday morning shooting spree in August of 2022. The first incident occurred shortly before 5 in the morning when a 28-year-old man was shot at an intersection. After initially walking away, the shooter returned to the scene and fired more bullets into the victim. Nobody called 911 to report the murder, which police believe would have given them a possible opportunity to catch the gunman before any more carnage could occur. Roughly 30 minutes after the first shooting, a teenager named Jemiah Lawrence was gunned down just 3 blocks away from the first crime scene. Police were investigating the second shooting when more gunfire broke out nearby. 43-year-old mother of 5, Laurie Briscoe, had been shot dead at a bus station. Much like the first incident, the gunman returned to the scene shortly after walking away and shot the victim several more times. Briscoe had taken the day off from her job as a medical receptionist to move to an apartment closer to her workplace. She was waiting to take a bus to a moving van rental business when she was killed. After killing Briscoe, the suspect shot 76-year-old John Palick and his dog. The senior citizen survived a gunshot wound to the leg thanks to the diligent actions of his neighbors, who rushed to his aid after hearing the gunshots and placed a tourniquet on his leg before rushing him to the emergency room. Palick's dog, who was shot in the foot, also survived. The shooter did not try to rob any of his victims, and the shootings all appeared to be random. Police initially thought the incidents were unrelated, but determined throughout the course of the investigation that one suspect was responsible for all 4 shootings. 12 hours after the last shooting occurred, law enforcement arrested 19-year-old Dante Ramon Smith, who had been recognized in surveillance footage that had been released to the public. He was taken into custody without incident, and the murder weapon was recovered from his home. Smith has no criminal record, but reportedly has a history of mental illness. His alleged motive for the random killings remains unclear. He's currently being held without bail on 3 counts of first-degree murder, 4 felony gun charges, and 1 count each of assault with intent to murder and animal cruelty. For those of you who haven't had your daily dose of They Will Kill You, stay tuned till after number 1, because up next is our previous release from a while back of 8 professional athletes turned criminals. Number 1. Marson We. High school student Michael Garr was walking down the street in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania at around 10 p.m. one night in April 2023 when he was fatally stabbed by a complete stranger. Investigators obtained an image of a man fleeing the scene on foot, but he managed to elude the authorities until 11 days later when undercover officers saw him leaving a local residence in clothing resembling the outfit he was wearing in the photo. Identified by police as 24-year-old Marson We, the man refused to cooperate with investigators. He was extradited to Ohio, where he was wanted on assault and vehicle theft charges. We pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. While waiting for the Ohio case to be resolved, detectives in Pennsylvania took the opportunity to thoroughly investigate the case. They were able to connect him to evidence from the murder, as well as the carjacking and stabbing of a pregnant woman that had occurred 2 months prior to Gar's murder. Ware was extradited to Pennsylvania, where he's facing a first-degree murder charge. He was found incompetent to stand trial, placing the case on hold while he undergoes psychiatric treatment in an effort to restore his mental health. Authorities have not disclosed a suspected motive, and it's unclear whether Ware will face charges in connection with the stabbing of the pregnant woman. New York native Eric Naposki cultivated a career in professional football spanning 9 years from 1988 to 1997. He played for 2 teams in the National Football League before transferring to the less prestigious World League of American Football. Following his unceremonious retirement from pro sports, Naposki largely faded from the public consciousness. Then in 2009, his name resurfaced in national headlines after the police in Newport Beach, California, made tremendous progress in their attempts to solve a cold 15-year-old murder case. Back on December the 15th of 1994, millionaire investor William McLaughlin was gunned down in his luxury Newport Beach home, which was located in a tight-knit gated community. Although the investigation initially yielded little results, the authorities eventually tied Naposki to the crime, along with Nanette Ann Johnston, the victim's living girlfriend and Naposki's secret lover. It was the former football player who'd fatally shot McLaughlin so that he and Johnston could make off with his $2.5 million life insurance policy. Despite consistently maintaining his innocence throughout the case's subsequent legal proceedings, Naposki was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder in the summer of 2011. Although he was eligible for the death penalty, the state didn't ultimately seek it, and he was instead given life without parole. As of the latest developments, it was reported that Naposki was appealing his conviction. Furthermore, the Orange County Innocence Project had reportedly begun a review of Naposki's case. Number 7. Kevin Ware. 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski had last been seen at a house party in Spring, Texas on April the 26th of 2021 before she was reported missing to the authorities by her mother. At the time of her disappearance, Pomaski's boyfriend, former professional football player Kevin Ware, was out on bond. He'd been arrested following a traffic stop during which law enforcement recovered multiple firearms and drugs from his vehicle. As investigators continued their search for Pomaski, suspicions began to fall on Ware. The couple had allegedly gotten into a violent argument at the party where Pomaski made her last known public appearance. On December the 10th of 2021, the woman's remains were recovered from a ditch in northern Harris County, although they weren't confirmed as hers until the following May. Then in July of 2022, Ware was indicted for murder and tampering with a corpse, accused of stabbing his wife, hitting her with a blunt object, and strangling her before burning her body. To prevent a trial in his drugs and weapons case, Ware pleaded guilty to those charges and in exchange received a 15-year prison sentence. As of the latest developments, his next scheduled court appearance in connection to the murder charge was set for February of 2023. Number 6. Mike Danton. In April of 2004, the St. Louis Blues and San Jose Sharks were embroiled in a hard-fought series as part of the NHL's annual Stanley Cup playoffs. Just hours after the underdog Blues were eliminated with a devastating Game 5 defeat, one of their players, left winger Mike Danton, was arrested on a charge of conspiracy to commit murder. A criminal complaint filed in federal court revealed that Danton and 19-year-old Katie Wolfmeyer had allegedly tried to hire a hitman to kill a male acquaintance. Prosecutors would later contend that the target of the murder plot was Danton's agent, David Frost. As news of Danton's arrest began to circulate, reports surfaced detailing his complicated relationship with Frost. The pair had first met while Danton was playing for a Frost-coached junior league hockey team. After that, Frost stayed on as his manager and developed what Danton's father described as undue influence and control over his client's life. During this time, as his professional hockey career was taking off, Danton started distancing himself from his parents and eventually became estranged from them. The man also began to exhibit erratic behavior, often staying out all night, drinking heavily and showing signs of mental instability. Following his arrest, Danton denied targeting Frost, instead insisting that it was his father, Steve, he wanted dead. He later reached a plea deal with prosecutors and ended up spending 65 months in federal prison. In the fall of 2009, Danton regained his freedom and even returned to professional hockey, playing for various teams in European leagues before his retirement in 2017. Number 5. Albert Belle. On March the 25th of 2018, former Major League Baseball player Albert Belle was arrested in Scottsdale, Arizona, for exposing himself to strangers. In a statement made by police, it was revealed that Belle had urinated next to a parked car outside a Phoenix soccer stadium before shaking his genitals at the vehicle's owner and his teenage daughter. Court records indicated he'd been charged with 2 counts of indecent exposure and 2 counts of driving under the influence. Although the charges were later dismissed, the incident wasn't the first time Belle had gotten into trouble with the law. Back in May of 2006, the 5-time All-Star and Silver Slugger was taken into police custody for allegedly harassing his ex-girlfriend while awaiting trial on a felony stalking case filed a few months earlier. According to police records, the woman had discovered a GPS tracker on her car. Law enforcement tied the device to Belle, who was also accused of making threatening remarks towards her. He was subject to electronic monitoring and prohibited from making contact with his former partner as he awaited the trial. However, the authorities were notified that he'd been making hang-up phone calls to his ex, and he was thus charged with violating the protection order. Belle was eventually sentenced to 90 days in jail, followed by 5 years probation. In October of 1995, while the man was playing for the Cleveland Indians, he was fined for reckless operation of a vehicle after chasing down teenagers who egged his house. The teen's family filed a lawsuit against Belle, seeking $850,000 in damages. In 1997, the suit was settled for an undisclosed amount. Number 4. Cedric Benson. Following a standout collegiate football career at the University of Texas, Cedric Benson was selected by the Chicago Bears with the 4th overall pick of the 2005 NFL Draft. After a pair of alcohol-related incidents in his home state of Texas, one of which involved him operating a boat while intoxicated, Benson was released by the Bears in 2008. He subsequently signed with the Cincinnati Bengals and became their leading rusher for 3 consecutive seasons before he ran into trouble with the law again. In June of 2010, Benson was arrested for allegedly punching a bartender in the face. The following year, he faced additional assault charges in the wake of a physical altercation with a former roommate. He was consequently suspended by the NFL for 1 game in 2011 before ultimately retiring from pro sports the following year. Benson's initial retirement years continued to be plagued by legal troubles. In December of 2014, he was charged with public intoxication following a verbal disturbance between a male and a female in a cab in the 900 block of North Lamar Boulevard in Austin, Texas. 2 years later, a woman sued Benson, alleging that his 2 Rottweilers had attacked her dog in Northwest Austin. Then in February of 2017, the former pro athlete was pulled over after his BMW was observed speeding in the 800 block of West 6th Street in Austin after an officer had clocked Benson going 12 miles per hour over the speed limit. The motorist proceeded to make an improper turn, then changed lanes without signaling. The traffic stop was conducted in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven and began with Benson getting out of his car and attempting to enter the convenience store, disregarding law enforcement's instructions. Officers noted his eyes were glassy, he was unsteady on his feet, his speech was slurred, and he smelled of alcohol. He refused field sobriety tests, was unable to recite the alphabet, and couldn't count past the number 3. So he was taken to Travis County Jail on a DWI. On August the 17th of 2019, Benson was killed in a motorcycle crash that also claimed the life of his female passenger. Number 3. Ken Caminiti. Throughout his eventful career in Major League Baseball, Ken Caminiti struggled with substance abuse a personal battle he publicly opened up about in 1994. 2 years later, Caminiti was named the National League's most valuable player as a member of the San Diego Padres and remained a productive contributor for 5 different teams until his retirement in 2001. In a Sports Illustrated cover story published the following year, Caminiti revealed that he'd been abusing steroids during and after his MVP season with the Padres. It also emerged that the former baseball star had been entrenched in a long-standing battle with cocaine addiction. The problem first surfaced in 2001 when federal officers tracked him down to the Ramada Limited Hotel in Houston, Texas. Law enforcement knocked on the door of his room and immediately detected the smell of burning crack cocaine. Caminiti and his 2 unidentified companions were arrested. Then 2 years later, he tested positive for cocaine while still on probation and was ordered to attend a Texas Department of Criminal Justice operated treatment program. In 2004, the former pro athlete received his 4th cocaine-related probation violation and was sentenced to 180 days in jail. Then, on October the 10th of 2004, Caminiti overdosed while at a friend's New York City apartment. He went into cardiac arrest and ultimately died at Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx. His official cause of death was ruled as acute intoxication due to the combined effects of cocaine and opiates. Number 2. Michael Richardson. In December of 2020, a former pro football star was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona on murder charges. According to local media reports, then 59-year-old Michael Richardson had been identified by police in the fatal shooting of 47-year-old Ronald Like. Richardson, who was an all-pro cornerback and Super Bowl champion with the 1985 Chicago Bears, was booked into the Maricopa County Jail on charges of second-degree murder and misconduct involving weapons. Investigators determined that the deadly altercation between Richardson and Like had centered around $200 worth of cocaine. Official reports further described the former pro athlete as a drug dealer who amassed over 21 drug-related offenses in the years following his 1989 retirement from football. At the time of his latest arrest, he'd also been wanted on a felony warrant, which the authorities then added to his list of offenses. As of the most readily available updates, it's unclear at what stage of the legal proceedings the case currently sits. Number 1. Javon Davis. Just days before his scheduled bout with Hector Luis Garcia, professional boxer Javon Davis was arrested in Parkland, Florida, on December the 27th of 2022. He reportedly faced a charge of battery causing bodily harm in connection to a domestic violence incident involving an unnamed woman whom he'd allegedly struck on the right side of her head with a closed hands type slap, causing an abrasion on her upper lip. It was the second time Davis was accused of domestic violence in as many years, as back in 2020, the boxing star was arrested for roughing up his ex-girlfriend at a celebrity basketball game. The man was reportedly seen forcefully grabbing the woman by the shirt and dragging her to a separate room during the game, which was held at the Watsco Center at the University of Miami. Thanks for watching. Would you rather go on a date with a convicted murderer or with your ex? Let us know in the comments section below.